everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What's happening, Rush Nation? Here we are, back with the Bible, episode 899 of the 5 Yard Rush podcast. 900 comes on Tuesday night, which is very special to be at that sort of level of podcast. Unbelievable, really. So to celebrate doing some sort of from the vault kind of podcasts, 9 of my favorite all-time episodes. So I've queued those up to come out tomorrow. So the podcast feed is going to drop with a lot of podcasts tomorrow, all of which is that sort of from the vault stuff that's a bit timeless, a bit classic, with some unbelievable guests we've had over the years on this podcast. It's quite humbling to go back and see who has actually been on and spent time. So there's some good listening for you to enjoy over this weekend, this Thanksgiving weekend for some, for others just a regular weekend, last weekend of November as we get into the Christmas period. Other things that dropped today, I dropped a few of the Patreon casts from earlier in the season, so you can get a bit of a sample of what the Patreon casts are like. I'm going to record a new one today. So if you want to hear those, you can do that through the free trial of the Patreon cast. So go onto patreon.com/5 Yard Rush and you can get a week's access to the Patreon. Now, here's what's great, right? I've put all the playbooks on there that I've written over the years. So you get access to all those. You can download those for free. You can keep those. So you keep those forever. So, you know, your free trial is going to have stuff you can take away, but you also get the Patreon cast, the rankings, and everything else. And then if you continue to stay on and pay, then you'll join our WhatsApp community and get all the rest of that. So, you know, $3 a month or £3 a month, it's not a lot of money, but appreciate times are hard and subscriptions are tough and lots of things and tools you can subscribe to. But last month of the season, you know, take the trial, maybe try it for a month and pay £3 and see what you get. You cancel any time. And hopefully we win you some ships and you stick with us. And then I pause the Patreon in the off season as well for a few months because the content goes down, obviously. So effectively, if you pay up, if you take the trial, sign up in December, and that's £3, that will take you through to the end of the season. And then I'll freeze the Patreon. So you effectively become a member for 6 months for £3, really, if you utilize it that way. So really cheap way to be part of the community that we're building, access to me, and yeah, lots of fun on the way. So hope to see you all there. Right, enough of that. Let's talk about the 12 games that we've got going on Sunday and Monday Night Football. So we're going to start with Commanders v Titans. The Commanders are favored by 5.5. The over-under is 44.5. There is still a bit of injury news that we're waiting on this one. So we're waiting to hear back on the running back situation, which we're hoping we'll get some clarity from today, maybe tomorrow at the latest, to see what's going on. I imagine it's going to be Chris Rodriguez as the lead back and then Jeremy McNichols, but we're waiting to see what happens with Brian Robinson Jr. I don't think you're going to see Austin Eckler at all. So that's what we're kind of waiting on to see what happens. I think with this game, I see the Commanders, I know they had they kind of offensively dipped a little bit over the last few weeks, but and this one, I think the Titans D has been sort of better than advertised in some regards. It did well to nullify Houston fairly well. I just think Jaden Daniels, they'll have to open him up a bit, let him control the game with his legs, and especially without that strong running game, I think they will absolutely do that, and then use Noah Brown as the big play targets regular and often to Terry McLaurin. I think it's kind of how you're going to see this game play out, and they have to just take control from the beginning of this game and just forever, just through the rest of this game, just really set the tempo and keep that tempo high. They sort of keep getting they don't seem to play a full 4 quarters. They haven't done for a while. I think they're going to need to do that this week. I think Tennessee are one of those teams that can hit you. Nick Westbrook-Akeen is giving them something very, very different. Tony Pollard has been pretty consistent running between the 20s. And Calvin Ridley is always a big threat. So, you know, you can't really sleep on Tennessee despite their record. I think you have to really, if you're Washington, push forward. I think they will take some strides to do that, especially knowing that they've got the bye next week, they can really give that extra push, knowing that they've got an extra week's recovery to go, which they've kind of been nursing a problem with week 14 bye. It's a long way to go. So fancy him to take care of business in this one. Jaden Daniels is actually my quarterback one this week as a result of that. Will Levis is quarterback 24, but I do actually see him with some upside in Superflex. I'm absolutely starting him in 1 QB. He's not on anybody's radars, but I do think he's actually got some appeal in Superflex this week. I think he will give you a decent return as long as he doesn't turn the ball over. That's the big risk with him. Tony Pollard is my lead running back in here. He's at 25, followed by Tajee Spears at 34. Do you think Spears is getting more and more into it? And I think he is going to take some touches away. But again, for me, I just think they'll score the touchdowns through the air. I don't see them getting them through the ground here. I do think Chris Rodriguez is going to be the lead back this week, is how I currently got it. He's at 36, but Nichols will hamper him again, given where I've got Daniels. I just think he's going to take some cream off both these guys, so I'm not starting any of them. If Brian Robinson does play, then obviously we'll have a very different way that we'll view that. So if you are on the Patreon, I will update my rankings accordingly there. The wide receivers, Calvin Ridley is my lead receiver in this game. He's at 16, followed by Terry McLaurin. I have him just outside the top 24, but I do think he has some upside. So I can see him sort of climbing the ranks there a little bit if he's targeted quite frequently here. Noah Brown's at 43, does carry a questionable tag, but I do think, again, another player with significant upside, as is Nick Westbrook-Akeem. Both these guys are flex plays for me this week, especially if you're chasing upside and chasing to overcome big results. Next, we come to tight ends, and really it's just about Zach Ertz in this one. He's at 10. He's seen a huge increase in production. I think that will continue, and he'll put up a solid top 10 week. The Commanders are my DST5 this week. And then lastly, when it comes to kickers, no Austin Seibert, he is on IR. So is Zane Gonzalez at 19. I'm probably not starting either kicker in this game unless absolutely desperate. All right, moving on to the next game. Falcons v Chargers. This is really, really close. It's got the Chargers favored by 1 point, over and under 47.5. Probably fancy the Chargers a little bit more than one. I guess what's going to hit them is the running game. No J.K. Dobbins, of course. He's got an MCL sprain, so he will be out this week. And then that just means that Gus Edwards is going to have to carry the load on his own, something he's not done this season. There is a talent there, but he hasn't really produced for the Chargers. Hassan Haskins might come in here. He might disrupt things a little bit as well. I've seen him be a very popular waiver ad this week. I'm not too sure. I'm not chasing that, but I can understand the logic on that, given that Gus Edwards hasn't been particularly great or explosive or solid in games. They might revert to that type, but they have stuck with Gus Edwards, whereas they haven't really tried and tested Hassan Haskins. So that, for me, is where I lean. I do think the Chargers will... The Falcons have been out of sorts, lost before the bye, but they are coming off a bye. I think I look at that and I look at the matchups there. I think Lab McConkey has a great matchup there against the Alford. I do think that the Chargers can put the squeeze on. They're going to have to get creative for how they use Bijan Robinson here. I think that's going to be really important as to how they look to use him. And then I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. I don't think there's going to be a lot of tight end usage here for Pitts. I think he's someone that's going to be sort of a bit isolated. So it's what they do with Darnell Mooney. He's sort of the X factor for me, especially as he's got a bit of an injury and he's questionable. So I think this game is close. I probably would pick the Chargers in this one in the pick'em, but let's see what happens. As for my rankings this week, at this point in time, I have Justin Herbert at 6. I think this would be a good matchup for him to throw the ball more, especially with that lack of foundation in the running game that's gone with J.K. Dobbins. Kirk Cousins at 23. This is a tough assignment for him. I do think, again, there's some upside with him, but I do think it's a challenge. Bijan Robinson's at 7. I think a lot of this will have to come through receiving. Can't see a big game on the ground personally, but you never know. I do get things wrong fairly frequently. Gus Edwards is my running back 24. I do think he is a bit dangerous. I have to go there. I think he's going to get a lot of volume, but I am nervous putting him there. I'll be honest with that. Tyler Algier at 43, Haskins at 49. He could go up. I'm not going to put him up, but I can see where he could have a big influence on the game here. As for the wide receivers, as I said, great matchup for Lab McConkey. He's at 10. Drake London, he's got the questionable tag. Now, Darnell Mooney's off the questionable tag. He did have it. when he did have it last night, so that's obviously been moved. Drake London, I think, will be fine. He'll play. He's at 13. Darnell Mooney at 17. Now that he doesn't have that tag, I've got Quinton Johnston all the way down at 47. 0 catches last week. That's a concern for me. He does have bounce back games. It does happen frequently, but yeah, just a bit out on him this week. Tough matchup, tough assignment this week for him. As for the quarterbacks here, tight ends here, Will Dissly's got a questionable tag. He's at 11 for me. No, if Kyle Pitts is at 16, I'm not starting Kyle Pitts. I don't have much Kyle Pitts, but I'm definitely not starting him anywhere in a game that matters, that's for sure. The Chargers I have at 15. I think it's not a bad spot for them. The Falcons I have at 29. I just think that for me, they don't commit too many turnovers, the Chargers, so it's going to be hard, and they don't commit many sacks. So I think it's going to be hard to see where the Falcons DST is going to score points. Cameron Dicker is my kicker 1 this week. I feel pretty good about that. Koo is all the way down to 16. He carries a questionable tag. I think he'll go, but yeah, a bit low on him this week. Bengals Steelers. Bengals favored by 3. Not sure I agree with that. Over under 47.5. Not sure I agree with that. It's probably about right. It's close. Yeah, I'd be taking the Steelers here. It's just the problem is the Bengals have a phenomenal offense, don't have a good defense. And I actually think that the Bengals kind of just don't put it together in the big games, or the offense doesn't. They just haven't played complementary football at any point of the season. So I actually think there's a possibility that the Bengals can score all the points. But I just think that the Steelers just do this thing where they score on every drive, even if it's just a field goal. And you can see them getting like Chris Boswell kicking like 5 field goals, and then they need a couple of touchdowns to win the game. And you can see that happening. That's exactly how I think this game is going to pan out. So I think it's going to be close, but I'd probably take the Steelers if I'm honest. I just trust them in a clutch. They're a bit more battle hardened than the Bengals here. But I do think the Bengals will score points. And so as a result, I've got Joe Burrow at 5. And I actually have Russell Wilson at 25. I'm not convinced he's going to throw many touchdowns. I think they're either going to get run in or they're going to be short touchdowns. I don't see a big yardage game from him, which is why I have a little bit of concern there with his ranking this week. Chase Brown is my running back 4. I think this is a great game for him. The Pittsburgh running backs I have in tandem at 29 and 33. I think they cannibalize each other, but I think both could have productive days, which is why I've got them both in sort of that flex-worthy sort of starter range. Jamar Chase is my wide receiver 2. T. Higgins is my wide receiver 12. They're sandwiched between George Pickens, who is at 11. They're the only 3 wide receivers you need to know for this game. Not starting either of the tight ends this week. They're both outside the 20s. Gesicki and Freiermuth, they're 24 and 25, so I'm not involving either of them this week. Nor, as for the Steelers, I've got the DST at 12. I think there's some turnover opportunities here, which could happen. And sack abilities, that's one thing I do think. And I think Chris Boswell's going to have a decent day. He's my kicker 6. McPherson is my kicker 13 this week. Not eagerly desperate to start him, as I said in the start-sit show. Patriots versus Colts. Colts favored by 2.5, over under 42.5. Feel both lines are good. I think that the Colts really have to utilize Anthony Richardson this week if they want to get a W. And so to do that, I think you're going to see more Anthony Richardson designed runs. I think you're going to see him move around the pocket a bit more. I think you're going to see him probably get a bit more of an expansive passing tree as well. He's a few weeks removed from the injury now. They should start to open the taps on him and see what he's got. It's a bit of a referendum now. Is he your guy moving forward? And he's so young, but he's going into year 3 next year. Age is not an excuse. Injuries in 2 years now. You've got to make that decision of, is he going to be your guy moving forward? You drafted him high in the draft 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. So you've got to make this decision. And I think the only way you can do that is to assess him by just putting in some throws. So, no Josh Downs this week. They're going to have to go with Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman Jr. You've paid all this money to Michael Pittman Jr. He's got to start earning that money as well. So I trust the Colts here. I think they're going to have to get a bit more expansive in what they're doing. As for the Patriots, I think, there's a bit of a referendum here on Jared Mayo. What are we seeing of the Patriots? We know that Drake May looks competent. He looks like he could be a QB of the future. Doesn't have a lot of weapons around him. We need to see Ramondre Stevenson step up. He is going to have to start showing that he wants and needs a new contract. And to do that, he's going to have to put in this end of season form that we've seen a few times before. So it's going to be a really interesting game. So there's a lot of interesting things in play here for future seasons, even though there's not much to play for this season. So as a result of that, I have Anthony Richardson as my quarterback 8 because I do think he'll have a decent rushing threat. I have Drake May at 19. I think he's going to get a little bit more bottled up with this one. I think he's going to get quite the help he needs in this game. Jonathan Taylor, running back 13. Ramondre Stevenson, running back 22. Antonio Gibson, running back 42. I won't be starting him in any scenarios this week. As for the wide receivers here, I've gone a bit cagey here. Michael Pittman's my leading receiver. He's at 34. I can easily make a case to move him up. I just don't know if I trust it in this scenario. Pop Douglas is at 49. He's got a questionable tag. Alec Pierce is at 57. He's got a questionable tag. So I'm not expecting huge returns here from the wide receivers, but I could see if I had to pick a guy to lean on, it would be Pittman this week. I'm just being a bit conservative based on the season we've seen. Hunt Henry is in play this week to search for a touchdown. He is my tight end 12 this week. Indianapolis don't really use tight ends. As for the DSTs here, Indianapolis Colts are 11. They're very much in play. And then as with the kickers, don't need to really worry about the kickers here. Matt Gay's at 17 if you're desperate, but there'll be better options available on your waiver wire. Moving on to Jaguars Texans. Texans only favored by 3.5, over under 43.5. And we're not really seeing the best of the Texans. They're going to win this division, not playing particularly great football. And again, they haven't really had a real strong identity and style last year that they kind of have lost. And we don't really know what this team is other than they're running the ball. They rely on Joe Mixon for pretty much everything in this offense. And then CJ Stroud will land some bombs and then the penalties take away lots of big plays. And there's been a sort of a lack of discipline with the Texans that are costing them games and costing them points and drives. So they need to get this right. They've got a key point in the season before they get to the bye. There's a lot of tired legs here as well. I think 3.5 is probably a bit too pessimistic. I think the Texans will win it by more than 3.5, even if Trevor Lawrence does return. And the over under 43.5, I see that being smashed. To be honest, I think this will be closer to 50. I think the Texans will put up points. I also think the Jags will put up points, especially if Trevor Lawrence is back. They're coming off a bye. You've got some fresh legs there. I think you'll see a bit of a boost there. So with all that in mind, I have CJ Stroud's my quarterback 11. I do think he'll put up some points this week. I have Trevor Lawrence, who is questionable currently at 20. Hoping to see him play this week and start to bounce back a little bit. Joe Mixon is my running back 2. Travis Etienne is my running back 35. And Tank Bigsby is my running back 40. I just think the game script, they're going to abandon the run like they have done quite a few times this season and just put the ball in the air. Nico Collins is at 6. Brian Thomas is at wide receiver 20. Tank Dell, wide receiver 26. Tank Dell is a pretty decent matchup this week, so hoping he makes the most of that. And then I have Evan Ingram at 6 in my tight end ranking. Sorry, he's at 5. He's at 5 in my tight end rankings. I'm not trusting Dalton Schultz this week. And then it comes to the DSTs. And I have the Houston Texans as my DST 2. I do think they'll get sacks on Trevor Lawrence or whoever's behind the line. I think they will contain well. And Kemi Fairbairn is my kicker 4 this week. I quite like him to bring a decent haul of return of points together. Right. Next up, Vikings, Cardinals. Vikings favored by 3, over under 45. Vikings just learning how to win and getting things done. Like both lines here. If anything, I'll probably tap the over. Vikings by 3 makes sense. I think the Cardinals are the hardest team to read in football. They've shown their real strong capabilities, but I think this game is going to be pretty difficult for them. If anything, I might take the Vikings better than 3. I think their defense will really squeeze them. I don't think they match up well. I don't think Kyler Murray matches up well. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be isolated. And I think this is all going to come down to how many yards and how much pressure can James Conner do on the run, and what is Trey McBride going to do as a tight end here. That's where they can get any form of success, but it is a tough assignment here. So I have Sam Darnold at 12. I have Kyler Murray at 16. I think he's being pretty much bottled up by most defenses at the moment. We're not really seeing the best out of him, but he is winning games. You have to give him some credit there. Aaron Jones is at 11. James Conner is at 20. Definitely, James Conner has the tougher assignment here. Aaron Jones is getting a lot of volume at this point, so that will carry him to an RB1 finish this week, I imagine. Justin Jefferson is at 5. I've got Jordan Addison at 33, but actually think there's some upside to him. So I quite like if he does what he did last week, he'll put up a really, really good performance. He's going to need to break free of his coverage to do that. Marvin Harrison is at 40. He'll have a tough assignment this week. That's for sure. Trey McBride is the top 3 tight end. He is at 3. Meanwhile, TJ Hawkinson starting to see the bounce back from him. He can get back to full health. He is at 8 this week in my rankings. And then the Minnesota Vikings are at 8 in my rankings. The Cardinals are at 13. There's definitely opportunities for both to be started this week. But I'm staying away from Chad Ryland. He's at 21. But Parker Romo is my kicker 10 this week. So I feel good about starting him. Jets Seahawks. Seahawks are favored by 1. Last time I looked at this, Jets were favored. So interesting, they've swung it back. I just think the Seahawks will win by more than 1. Over under 42. Yeah, probably feels right. Both teams scoring around 20 points. Yeah, I think the Seahawks will win by more than 1, like a 24-20 kind of game. Yeah, I just think the Seahawks will have too much for the Jets. But I think from a fantasy perspective, this is going to be a rough one. So I don't think there's going to be many here that'll be making lots of fantasy impact. And you'll see that in my rankings. Geno Smith is at my QB 15. Aaron Rodgers is at 29. He has been pretty poor in his last few outings when he has been healthy. Kenneth Walker Jr. is my running back 8. Breece Hall is currently questionable, so keep an eye on the status of that. But he's my running back 10. If not, definitely have a look at Breland Allen, who's currently at 55 in my rankings, but he'll move up if there is no Breece Hall. So keep an eye on the news there. As for the wide receivers in this game, Devontae Adams is at 22. DK Metcalf carries a questionable tag, so he's at 25. Jackson Smith and Jigba is at 36. Garrett Wilson is at 37. And then there is no need to look at the tight ends here. Highest tight end here is going to be I think it's Tyler Conklin, Noah Fant at 31 and 32. So I'm out on both the tight ends in this game. That's one thing for sure. And then we've got the DSTs here. Seattle Seahawks are at 9. I think that they'll get the ball here. And they'll definitely turn over Aaron Rodgers a few times here. And they'll get to him with some sacks. And then also looking at the kickers here, not too keen. Jason Myers at 20. Anders Carlson is at 27. So I'm staying away from the kickers in this one. It's not loads of high elite performance. You probably say that Kenneth Walker's the pick and maybe Breece Hall are the pick of the players here. 3 games in the late slate here. We're going to start with the Panthers versus the Buccaneers. Buccaneers favored by 6. Over under 46.5. Yeah, I mean, look. Panthers did well last week. They just give them some credit. I think they did well last week. They played well last week. They pushed the Chiefs close to get to, to be tied the game with a minute to go, or, down to the last play. Like, it's as good as it kind of gets for Carolina. They played well. They showed some stuff in the second half, some real heart and spirit. And Bryce Young is starting to improve ever so slowly. I still question where he's going to be in terms of at the end of the season, but and going forward. But you have to give him some credit that there is some improvements there, and it is starting to look slightly better than it did at the start of the season when he was benched. On the flip side of that, the Buccaneers are this juggernaut that are their record is a real false economy. The first half of the season, they played the Lions and won, they played the Eagles and won, but then they played the Ravens and got embarrassed. They were really close against the 49ers. They were really close against the Chiefs and lost in overtime. They lost in overtime to the Falcons. So this team, and we're carrying a lot of injuries as well. It's a bit of a false economy. Their record doesn't really represent what this team is. This team is an 11-win team. Again, they beat the 2 best teams in the NFC and were pretty comfortable beating the Eagles, like they destroyed them. Last week, they dispatched of the Lions like an annoying little fly. We're up 30-0 and pretty much just checked out for the second half. And my worry for fantasy is the same thing will happen again. On paper, it looks like a phenomenal matchup. You're like, yep, start everyone. This will be great. But the Buccaneers know that they've got bigger games ahead, and their tempo is to go out there, score early. They've scored in a touchdown on like 5 or 6 of their games already this season. That's what they're going to look to do. See if they can get the ball first, go down the field, score a touchdown, get a stop, get another score, go up 10 points or better, and then stuff the game out. And that's how I see the Buccaneers playing this particular game and how they'll look to cash in. I think, yeah, the Panthers can try and keep with them, but they're going to need to. Or we could get into a situation like last week, Buccaneers up 24 at half, 30 at half. And this is possible with that Carolina defense is not great. And if that happens, there isn't going to be much of a garbage time. The Buccaneers will just run the football, and then they'll see the game out. So I'm a bit casual here with my rankings, especially with someone like Baker Mayfield this week, because I just think that there is a cap there. You know, they scored 4 rushing touchdowns. He didn't throw a touchdown last week, and they still put up 30 points. They don't need to. This running game has gone really, really well this season. So Baker Mayfield is at 9. I have Bryce Young at 27. I think he's going to find it a tough day with Todd Bowles' pressure and with those guys starting to get some sacks up the middle and players coming back here. As for the running backs here, Bucky Irving is one to highlight here. He's at 17. I think he's going to get the majority of the work going forward. Chuba Hubbard is at 9. Rashad White is at 31. In the receiving game, he'll definitely get his. And Sean Tucker's at 50. If this game is a bit of a blowout and it's taken in control, you're going to see more of Tucker in the second half, and he could be a sneaky flex play. But that's the situation you're kind of gambling on. Only do that in deep leagues. Wide receivers have got Mike Evans at 15. He's coming back to fitness again. I think if they get up early, I don't think you're going to see him much in the second half, similar to last week. He'll play until the game is wrapped up. So if this game does become a blowout and he hasn't got his, it could be a tough one, but I think he'll be in good spot here. Adam Thielen is at 46. Leggett is at 51. David Moore is at 58. Sterling Shepard is in the 70s. I really expected to see more out of him in this absence of Chris Godwin, but that has not been the case. It's all gone to the running backs here. As for the tight ends, I've got K. Dalton at 14. He's just outside my top 12. And that's because 2 of the guys who hadn't really performed this season who have gone above him, Sam Laporta and Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz has been starting to trend upwards, and Sam Laporta scored touchdowns last night. So K. Dalton at 14 is not a big disgrace. I do think there's some upside for him to move up from that number as well. So I like him as now. Some people were dropping him after last week's performance. He had a couple of drops. He was still getting targeted, but the drops were there. Bucks defense at 4. By the way, I haven't mentioned Jatarian Saren, so I'm not sure if he's going to go in this one. So Tommy Tremble would be the tight end that likely go. Chase McLaughlin is my kicker 3 this week. I like him in all formats to start. Saints Rams favored by 3 over under 49.5. Yeah, watch out for the Saints. They're putting some offense together. You've got Marcus Alder-Scantling 2 games before the bye. Absolutely blew up. Alvin Kamara is going to be a big threat in this one. I think this matchup is good for him. Be interesting to see what they do with Taysom Hill. He's been getting a lot more work in here. So I think narrow tree for the Saints, but don't sleep on them. They can put up points. As for the Rams, it's pretty much same old. We know what we're getting with the Rams. We know it's going to be all through just 4 players really on this offense, and that's how it's really going to roll. So I've got Matt Stafford at 14. I've got Derek Carr at 28, but I do have some sneaky upside on Derek Carr. So I might be moving Derek Carr up my rankings as the week goes on. In fact, I'm probably almost certain to do that. I've got him now on the first and second pass, but I actually think that, it's really just down to turnovers. If he gets turned over, it's why I end up that low. But I actually think there'll be more yardage there. I think this game with the over-unders ripe for him to probably be nearer to 20 this week. As for the running backs in this game, Alvin Kamara is at 1. Kyron Williams is at 5. I think both of these guys are going to get theirs this week for sure. And then both the receivers of the Rams I've got in my top 3. Nakua at 1, Cup at 3. This is definitely a Cooper Cup game. Marcus Valdes-Scantling, he is at 30. I'm definitely ranking him higher, I think, than almost anybody in the world right now, just because he's continued to deliver for a couple of weeks, and I kind of saw this progression. He's a big part of that offense. Taysom Hill is at 4, so he's going to be a big part of this one as well. As for the DSTs here, the Rams are at 19, the Saints are at 28, so not keen on starting any of them this week because of the high point score. And the kickers, just a bit of inconsistency there. Carty's at 14. Blake Group, he's at 18. So again, not bad for sort of chasing upside and points, but not ones you definitely feel like a must start. Last game of the late window is Ravens v Eagles. Ravens favored by 3, over under 50.5. This for me is the game of the week by a country mile. I think the Eagles at their record are a real false dawn, and I think everyone has been giving them flowers. They have not played anyone particularly good this season. And, you know, their record kind of talks to that. So if we look at their record this season, let's look at who they've played. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful here at the Eagles. I respect them as a team and respect them for what they've done, but they haven't really played top teams this season. All right, they beat the Packers week 1. Good performance, can't knock that, but it was a close game. They lost to the Falcons in week 2. They narrowly beat the Saints 15-12, which, okay, to be fair, the Saints were flying first 2 weeks of the season. So, you know, you give that. The offense stifled, the defense got them through that game, whatever. They got whooped by the Buccaneers in week 4, and then they have been on a quote-unquote tear. But this is the teams they've beaten. You know, the Browns, the Giants, the Bengals, which, okay, they held the Bengals to 17 points. So, you know, let's give them a bit of respect there. The Jaguars, the Cowboys without Dak, and then the Commanders. Okay, not a bad win, the Commanders. They had been a bit of a slide before then. And then the Rams. I mean, they put 37 points up on the Rams. So, again, they've shown times they can put points. Saquon Barkley having a phenomenal season, and they can do that to anyone. But if they really played a top-tier opponent, when you look at their records and say the 3 best teams they have faced, 4 if you include the Commanders, are the Falcons, the Buccaneers, and the Packers. I'm not saying they've really been tested by a top team, whereas the Ravens have played a lot of top teams already this season. They'll be more prepared and more ready for this game. Also, the Eagles, by the way, their schedule to round out is a little bit ridiculous. So after this one, they've got the Panthers, the Steelers, the Commanders again, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. I mean, the NFC least is really propping them up quite considerably this season. And so if the Ravens can stop Saquon Barkley, they will win this game quite comfortably, and it'd be my more than 3. So that's kind of my thoughts on this one. So I have these quarterbacks back-to-back, Jackson at 2, Jalen Hurts at 3, again, both for their rushing ability. That brings a safe floor and a high ceiling there. Saquon Barkley is my running back 3. I don't think we're going to see the electric, like, record-breaking game as we've seen before. I actually have Derrick Henry at 15. I think he's going to be contained quite well by this Philly D. And I think you're going to have to see Lamar play some of his best football to win this game. AJ Brown is at 7. Zay Flowers at 19. Devonta Smith, who is questionable after not playing last week, he's at 35. Rashad Bateman's at 60. He's a good little outside flex bet. Again, if you're looking for those ceiling plays, Rashad Bateman is one I definitely am interested in, as I have been all season. Dallas Goedert is at 17, but sneaky play, I think he could easily move up here. I think they could utilize him. Mark Andrews at 20. This is not a play for Mark Andrews this week, that's for sure. As for the DSTs here, I actually have them quite low ranked at 25 and 26. These quarterbacks don't make mistakes. I don't think you're going to see a lot of turnovers. I think the ball's going to be held well. I think it's really going to come down to who makes the big plays when it matters. I think the under's in play here. I really do. I think both these defenses are underrated. The Justin Tucker is at 8 and Jake Elliott is at 11. That's kind of where I'm at with them. Sunday night football, Bills v 49ers, another cracking game, but Bills favored by 7, over under 43.5. I think the over gets smashed here. I think that's too low. I definitely don't see that being the ending total. But again, I'd be wrong before. I was wrong last night. Sure, it can happen again. But I feel pretty strongly that I think that over gets cracked. But like Buffalo's line, I think that's a good line. I think that's fair. That's how I see this game. I think Buffalo will control this game all the way through. We have to also see what's going to happen at this moment. I don't have Brock Purdy in the top 32 of my rankings, but he can switch there if something was to happen. At the moment, so Josh Allen is at 4. Brandon Allen is my quarterback in at the moment this week. He's at 32. But if Brock Purdy does play, I will obviously move him in there. At this point, I'm not sure. I don't think he is going to play. As for the running backs here, James Cook's at 19. I think he'll get stifled. Christian McCaffrey's at 16. I think he gets stifled. His upside will be receiving. This is half point PPR. In PPR, he'd probably be significantly higher. As for the wide receivers here, Juwan Jennings, he is at 23. Deebo Samuel, he's got a tough assignment. He's at 29. Khalil Shakir's at 41. I think his volume will get held down a bit here. Amari Cooper at 61. Still haven't seen the best of him in a Buffalo Bills jersey. But these tight ends will be interesting for sure. George Kittle is at 9. Dalton Kincaid, he's currently questionable. He's at 19. If not, Dawson Knox could be a really sneaky play this week. And then as for the DSTs here, Buffalo Bills are at 10. San Francisco 49ers are at 22. And then that leads just the kickers. Tyler Bass is at 9. And Jake Moody is at 26. That brings us on to Monday Night Football. I'll be honest with you, I'm not staying up for this one. I will be watching this one on Game Pass on Tuesday morning. It is going to be the Broncos and the Browns. There's no disrespect for the two teams, but I don't really feel like there's enough there for me to stay up after all night Sunday watching football to watch this one. I think it is one for the purists. I think that the Broncos will win this comfortably. I'm not here for Jameis Winston throwing 4 interceptions, is what I expect could happen in this game. So I had Broncos favored by 5.5, over under 41.5. I actually think the Broncos will win this very comfortably. I think it could be a double-digit win. I just think I've seen enough Jameis Winston to think, and he plays against a team with good coverage and good defense. I could just see them getting a jump. And I can just see him getting picked. I could also see him getting panicked by the pass rusher and just throwing balls into double coverage and triple coverage. I feel like I've seen this game 100 times from Jameis Winston. I don't feel like I need to see it again in real time. I'll watch it back. I fully expect the Broncos to win this game and win it quite comfortably. So with that in mind, going to my rankings, let's just pull them up one last time. Bo Nix at 7. He does have a questionable tag. I'm not too worried about that. James Winston is at 21. I think he is in for a rough time. He could prove me wrong. He could be a real hero, but I'm just not confident this week in him at all. Nick Chubb's at 30. I think he's going to have a hard day. Javonte Williams is at 32. I don't think there's going to be much of this game played on the ground. I think you're going to see a lot of sort of mixing and matching between the running backs here. Jerome Ford's at 46. Audric Estime's at 48. Jaleel McLaughlin's at 51. I think they all kind of cannibalize each other. I don't see a high ceiling there from anybody. As for the receivers, I think this is a great week for Courtland Sutton. He's at 9. I think he'll take full advantage. Jerry Jeudy's got a tough one. He's on Patrick Surtain. He's my wide receiver 39 as we saw. Devon Veely is at 42. Again, he carries nice upside. I like him in a flex play, chasing points. Elijah Moore is at 53. Have I missed Cedric Tillman? I think he's got a bit of an injury, isn't he? So he's out of my rankings, which is why. But if he does play, I'll move him up. He'll probably be somewhere between Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, probably somewhere in the 40s. As for the tight ends here, I have David Njoku at 6. Greg Dulcich has unfortunately been cut by Denver, so I'm not ranking any of their DSTs. Denver will be my DST 3 this week. The Cleveland Browns at 21. And then moving on to the kickers, you could start Will Lutz this week. He's at 7. I think he's going to get plenty for the points, but I'm not in on Dustin Hopkins this week. That's one thing for sure. That's going to do it. That is the Fantasy Football Bible in about 40 minutes. I hope this has been useful for all of you. I hope you've made plenty of notes and you see lots of useful information. And then, please do interact. Please do rate and subscribe to the show on Spotify, help us with some rankings and reviews. So please do write us some lovely reviews wherever you watch the show. And then also leave us some comments on YouTube. That would be absolutely fantastic and would mean the world to all of us. But until then, we will be back next week with episode number 900. So look forward to seeing all of you there, 8 o'clock UK time on Tuesday night. But until then, don't forget Rush Station. As always, keep rushing.